my learning experience project, I wanted to learn about adoption. Over the years, I have heard a lot about adoption. I have heard about families adopting children in my church, I have heard stories about adoption from friends, and I have friends who have been adopted or who have siblings who are adopted. This prompted me to use this learning opportunity to explore adoption and to find out more about it. I wanted to use this learning opportunity both for professional development and for personal enjoyment and growth, and to learn about the general process of adoption and the general statistics of adoption in the United States. What I first wanted to learn about was the process of adoption. I learned that adoption is a complicated process that requires many steps to be taken before families can even be considered to adopt a child, and families can sometimes wait years before they are approved to adopt a child. After researching many websites about how adoptive parents adopt a child, I found some general guidelines that outlined the process of adoption. First, prospective parents select an agency. Second, a home study and interviews must be completed, which involves several meetings between the social workers and adopters. Third, adopters and agencies work together to search for adoptable children. Adopters are given profiles of children to choose from based upon the guidelines they set. Fourth, the adopters must choose a child and be approved to adopt that particular child. Fifth, the adopters meet the child. If it is an international adoption, parents travel to the country where their adopted child lives and go through the process of obtaining a visa for their new child to come back to the U.S. Sixth, the adopters are given a placement date on which the child will be placed in their home. And finally, the adoption must be finalized by the government or a court session, in which legal documents are filed and the child becomes legally adopted. Learning about the process of adoption prompted me to learn about the different types of adoption that can take place. I searched many websites and was interested to learn that there are many different types of adoption, and these include domestic, international, step-parent, relative, agency, and private adoption. Once I learned about the process of adoption and the different types of adoption that can take place, I wanted to learn about foster care. What I learned about foster care is that each year there are almost 500,000 children in foster care in the United States, and at least 120,000 of these children are waiting to be adopted. Generally, children are put into foster care because of abuse or neglect, and these children are taken from their homes and put into a different home for their safety. I found that the average time of stay in foster care for a child is about 13.3 months, and in that time some children can be placed in many homes. About half of the children in foster care are waiting to be reunited with their parents, while others are waiting to be adopted, live with other relatives, or get placed in long-term foster care. Each year, only about 25% of all children in the foster care system are adopted. Once I found out about the process of adoption and the facts about foster care, I wanted to learn about the statistics of adoption in the U.S. I learned that between the years of 1999 and 2010, there were 224,615 adoptions of international children by U.S. citizens. In 2010 alone, there were 11,058 adoptions. A comprehensive list of all children adopted in the U.S. has not been compiled since 1992, but in that year there were an estimated 126,951 children adopted through international, foster care, private agency, independent, and step-parent adoption. I personally had no idea this many children were being adopted each year, and was truly astounded to learn of this number. After learning the overall numbers, I then went on to learn about where these children were coming from. What I found was that the top 4 countries of adopted children were China, Ethiopia, Russia, and South Korea. Last year, there were 3,401 Chinese children adopted, 2,513 Ethiopian children adopted, 1,079 Russian children adopted, and 863 South Korean children adopted. To wrap up my learning experience, I conducted an interview with family friends who have adopted 2 children from China, both of whom have physical special needs. This family already has a young son and other older children, so I was interested to hear what it was like for them to adopt children. The first question I asked was why they chose to adopt. Their answer was that they both have always had a strong desire to adopt, and they had many friends who had adopted who they were able to talk with about the decision, and that made it easier for them to decide to adopt. Next, I asked them in short the process they went through to adopt their children. They responded that they had 5 to 7 interviews, but the most time-consuming part of the process was the paperwork. There were background checks and doctor visits and financial inquiries, all which required extensive paperwork. Their first adoption took almost 3 years to complete, while their second adoption was about 14 months. Then I asked them how they decided which child to adopt. They said that the adoption agency sends pictures and a file on children who fit the description of the child they are wanting to adopt. based on characteristics like age, gender, and special needs. The process of deciding on a particular child was by far the most difficult part for them in the adoption process, and China only gives families 48 hours to decide once they receive the file on a particular child, so they had to make an important decision within about 2 days. When they saw the child's picture for the first time, it was joyful and sad for them, because they were excited to see what their child looked like, but they wanted to immediately start caring for their child. But they had to wait several months before that could happen. Finally, I asked them what it has been like having their 2 adopted children and how it has been different from raising their other biological children. The husband responded, "Our experience with our 2 adopted children was very different. Both were about 20 months old when we first got them in China. When our daughter got home with us, she was very sad and even angry for about 2 weeks. But now she is a very sweet girl and just loves her family. Our son was just the opposite, very quiet, very affectionate, and very obedient. Raising them has not been very different at all than raising our own biological children." I can use this knowledge that I have learned about adoption and foster care to help me as a teacher in the future. Now that I have been made aware of the large number of children who are in foster care or are adopted, I realize that I will most likely have children in my future classrooms that are in these very situations. I think my new knowledge about the process of adoption and foster care will help me relate to these students better, and I feel that I now would be better able to care for these children. I also think that because I have learned about adoption and foster care, I will be able to educate the children in my classrooms about these realities and help them relate to their fellow classmates who may have been adopted. Overall, this learning experience has given me valuable knowledge about adoption and foster care children. It was difficult to learn about the large number of children who are abandoned and in need of adoption, but this experience has opened my eyes to this reality, and I am so grateful I got to learn about it.